They developed a multifunctional bathroom. Privacy, I don't know what the fuck I'm reading. I wonder what the fuck the real dialogue is. What the fuck is this thing? All of the windshield, for fuck's sake. Oh, fuck. What the fuck did I say? That didn't sound for shit, did it? And here, under the hood, we stored something that'll really come in handy if it doesn't fall out and break my leg. Ah! What we're doing is we're building a fucking industrial film, trying to give these guys everything they can get. I mean, that's it. Fuck it. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying. We suppose we open... Gotta do it again, right now. Oh, fuck. 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 Oh, fuck. Shit. Tony, do me a favor, will you please? Will you? Will you do me a kindness?
Leave.
Yeah.
I think I want to be walking in and out if you're going to fuck up and I got to come back.
I don't make any difference to me at this juncture. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Tony. Don't slam the fucking door. No more. Listen, I've got to give a clue here now. I don't want any more bullshit anytime during the day from anyone. That includes me. It's going to be very hot. It's going to be very uncomfortable for everybody. Want anybody yelling? We get anybody yelling around here anymore today, and then the shit is going to hit the fan. And they fit the diverse needs of a very big firm, and they fit the needs of a very diverse buyer segment. Why can't I remember? I wrote this stuff. Why can't I remember it? Why don't I say it fucking right? What does the goddamn line say, Tony? What is the goddamn line? I don't give a shit what the line is. I fucked up the word rear. I can't even read the fucking BO straight. What the fuck was that? We got flies all over the fucking place. Son of a bitch. Get out of here, you fucking flies. There's a fly over the headlight, Tony. We got flies coming for us. Fuck. Fuck out of here, you flies. We got 3 flies, 5 flies. And if you will, make sure, if you will, we don't have that fly on the left side, on the passenger side, because we don't have that in frame, but make sure we don't have any flies here. And we don't have any flies. Here we go. Get out of here, you goddamn jackass.
There's no words on it. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Fuck it. I've never seen that. Fucking thing sucks. There's no words there. Fuck it. There's no words on it. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Fuck it. I've never seen that. Fucking thing sucks. There's no words there. I don't know. Fuck. I don't know. Fuck. I don't know. Fuck. I don't know. Fuck. I don't know what. Go. I can't do it. Fuck it. Go. I can't do it. Fuck it. Go. I can't do it. Fuck it. Go. I can't do it. Thanks again for watching. Fuck it. There's no words on it. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Fuck it. I've never seen that. Fucking thing sucks. There's no words there. Fuck it. There's no words on it. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Fuck it. I've never seen that. Fucking thing sucks. There's no words there. Okay. Take it away. Go. Yeah. Go. Yeah. Go. Yeah. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Go. Yeah. Go. Yeah. Go. Yeah. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Go. Go. What does that mean? To play us out? To end the show? Yeah.
Hello, Dark Horse Live, episode 75. Welcome, everybody. Happy Halloween. This is technically a Halloween episode. It's Halloween Sunday, I think, so happy Halloween, everybody. Something really spooky happened to us, I guess, 2 weeks ago. We took last week off, so thanks for being here tonight. Special time. And sorry we missed you last week, but so we went out to BizCon, and that was kind of a fright fest in itself. But yeah, something spooky happened 2 weeks ago in the chat after the show went up, one of the biggest narcs, I shouldn't say one, probably the biggest narc in the history of cannabis was in our chat or in the comment section commenting up some foolish shit. So I figured, fuck it, let's bring Todd McCormick back for an encore episode, and we'll talk about whatever this dude is trying to talk about. But yeah, I already know the story. It's not brand new news, but it's fucking the scariest thing I could think of to happen on a Halloween show. So yeah, with that said, let's go free shit.
It's free!
All right, tonight on the free shit, I'm being lazy and I have some leftover goodies. This is from Daz. Let me make sure I'm reading it right. Yeah, Pope Banner. Pope Banner the Third. Pope Banner the Third, Daz, Night Owl Drop. You think these are sold out? I think maybe. But you want them? Do you want them? Dark Horse Live or Dark Horse Genetics Live at gmail.com is the email address. Hold on one sec. Todd is joining us. Okay, got him. Todd, if you can hear me, we'll be right with you, bud. All right, Dark Horse Genetics Live at gmail.com is the email. In the subject line to win, just so you guys know, I see it in the chat every time. We don't announce the winners. We could, but I didn't really want to dox people. We did in the first few episodes, but I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like, if people want to say they won, they can say they won. But we email you back. That's how you know if you won, just so everyone knows. But you have to send an email to darkhorsegeneticslive at gmail.com. In the subject line, Caesar, what is the code word this week?
Snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches. You got to write in the code word, or in the subject line of the email. And if you write that in the subject line of the email, I'm going to pick the 75th for the 75th episode. There you go.
Halfway syndication.
75th episode, 75th person who writes snitches get stitches in the subject line wins. All right, that's how you win tonight. Let's go here. I'm going to not waste any time, and we're going to go right to Todd if we can, and we'll just get straight into this story here. And briefly, I'll kind of preface what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Neville, and if you don't know who Neville is, you're in for a bit of a treat, because this dude is a bit of an enigma, a mystery of himself, but he's a crazy story, and Todd was around a little bit. He was probably the closest person I can think of to it. So he's written an excellent article on the subject, and I think I actually put it in the description of this video. If you're on YouTube or Twitch, you should definitely read that article. That article is Todd's super well written, super well spoken, as you know if you've seen last week's episode. If you don't know who Todd McCormick is, you should definitely go back and watch last week's episode. It was fantastic. But yeah, he's super well written, and he wrote a great article about this, and I just wanted to do a deeper dive on it and ask him some questions. And with that said, let me see if I can't get him here. Let's plug him in. 1 second, hold with me. Looks like we have him. Todd, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We may have a little lag there, but that's all right. We can work through it.
How's it going?
Good evening to you too, Caesar.
Yeah, thanks for doing it again, man. Like I say, everyone loved last week's episode. It was fascinating, and like I said, something sort of happened in the comments after the fact. So I figured, fuck it, man. We were gonna give him dipshit of the day, but I hit you up, and you're like, let's just talk about what had happened and all. But before we kind of go down that story, if you would, let's just talk a little Neville, if you would. I kind of mentioned just before we brought you on about your article. I told people to go read it, but if you would, give us a crash course on Neville and who this man is, because a lot of people don't really know who the guy is. And I'll preface it, he's not like he's a legend of the business, but a lot of people would say he's not really a nice guy. He's certainly, to me, he's like a Hunter S. Thompson type, where he was a super drug addict, did all kinds of crazy shit, crazy stories. And somehow it's like holds a fond place in my heart for this dude as like the counterculture legend. But there's a lot of people that hate him, a lot of people that love him. But with that said, I'll turn it over to you, Todd. Tell us a little bit about Neville, if you would.
It's an interesting introduction. For those watching, Neville was the man who really had the courage to start the first seed company that would send seeds to American addresses. And that was a really big deal for 1984 and 1985. And Neville paved the way to an industry that became the standard, if you will, when it came to seed companies and slinging seeds. And in that role, his breeding work, his seed distribution is legendary, I would say. And I was a young grower, started growing weed in 1984, reading High Times. First read about Neville in the 80s and the Holland Seed Bank and Northern Lights. And, it was like living a dream, or just reading about him living in some big mansion in the Netherlands and growing cannabis and working with all these legendary varieties. And, Neville, for that, I credit the man. He had courage. He was at the right place at the right time. He had the willingness to do what other people wouldn't do. And I give him credit without question. Yeah. He was brave, and he paid a deep and dear price for that bravery. In all reality, he became, the probably most wanted man for slinging seeds ever out of Europe.
Did he make the top 10 most wanted lists in the FBI?
I doubt it. I mean, the DEA isn't, they have real problems, and Neville Schumacher's certainly wasn't one of their real problems. It was, the DEA was aggressive, to say the least, in the 80s and 90s. They had all the power of Reagan and the drug war and funding, out the wazoo, and they used it. And unfortunately, cannabis was, one of the low fruit to grab on the drug war tree. So they went after cannabis growers, cannabis users, before they went after, real drug nuisances, I would say. And it's unfortunate. But with Neville, Neville started the Holland Seed Bank, crazy enough, with a loan from the Dutch government. Unfortunately, Neville had a heroin addiction, and he was trying to beat his heroin addiction. So what he did is there was basically a program for ex-junkies to be able to get into business. And his business was a cannabis seed company. And it's pretty incredible.
This
the
was
Dutch
in
government's
Holland?
1984. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. So
1984.
Neville was Australian by birth, I believe, and he kind of got in a little bit of hot water there and sort of went on the lam, did he not?
He did. Neville unfortunately discovered the wonders of drugs at a rather young age and became an addict at a rather young age, and it got him in a lot of trouble at home. And he basically went to the Netherlands to live with his uncle to get away from the trouble. But Rotterdam and other cities in the Netherlands was, nothing but a heroin junkie's dream. So, from, out of the pot and into the fire, unfortunately for the guy. And he was right back in the mix. And he also had a problem with alcohol, because part of trying to kick heroin, he would drink. He'd drink like a fish. And I have nothing but sympathy for the man's addictions. I'm not here to criticize somebody for their own demons, but unfortunately it shaped his life and the relationships around him, like it often does with people. I had a cousin who was a heroin addict. She passed away 30 years ago, but I know what it's like to deal with, these people. Truth is not their strong point, to put it politely. And, Neville was supposedly inspired by picking up a Mel Frank grow book in 1981. And he started getting interested in growing cannabis in 1981, 82. By 1983, I think he planted some seeds in his backyard and tried to pull off a crop in the Dutch summer. Didn't really work out that well. In 1984, he had the idea of collecting seeds from the Dutch seed coffee shops and reselling them in his first catalog. He was selling seeds for, I think, 25, 50 cents a piece, with the disclaimer that he couldn't really vouch for them because he didn't grow them himself. And in 1984, his luck turned around. He was introduced to Skunk Man Sam, who is the breeder of Skunk Number 1 and the savior of Hayes. And he owned a company called Sacred Seeds, which was, I'd call Skunk Man Sam a seed saver. He sees the usefulness in genetics and their undiscovered abilities. So he holds on to genetics and he hoards genetics. And he's done a great job of disseminating the same genetics, and it's been incredible. But he met Neville, and in 1984, he sold him quite a few of the varieties, such as Durban Poison, Afghani 1, Hindu Kush, Skunk Number 1, California Orange in 1985. And that became the basis of Neville's seed catalog. And then in 1984 and 1985, he also met a man from Seattle named Greg. We'll refer to him as Seattle Greg. Greg wanted to get some of the varieties that Neville had, so Greg numbered the hybrids he had of a variety he called Northern Lights, which was based on an Afghan / purist indica from a gentleman who wrote a book called Murphy Stevens. It was one of the best grow books to come out in the 70s. He went over cloning and CO2 enrichment, mother plants. I mean, he was way ahead of his time, considering 1975. But he befriended Greg and he hooked him up with Northern Lights, or he hooked him up with this Afghan. Greg ended up breeding it with other varieties and sharing the genetics within a community, and a community of people bred what we refer to as Northern Lights number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He hooked Neville up with these varieties, and Neville went on to become, really to make them famous, started breeding them with the other varieties that he got from Skunk Man Sam, such as Skunk One and Northern Lights. And, the results were legendary. In 1987, sometime, Neville got a couple Hayes males from Skunk Man Sam and started crossing that. And we saw Hayes enter into Neville's catalog in 1988 with Northern Lights by Hayes crosses and Skunk by Hayes crosses. And it revolutionized a lot of Neville's breeding, because prior to that, he was really breeding together plants that had similar genetics, meaning earlier flowering varieties. And when he started using Hayes, which is a dissimilar genetic, he started getting really good hybrid vigor and F1 characteristics. And, his seed sales really took off, 88, 89. 1990, unfortunately, he was arrested. Somebody in his organization turned him in, and he was imprisoned for a year while visiting his family in Australia. And a gentleman named Ben Dronkers, who now owns the Holland Seed Bank, what became the Holland Seed Bank is now Sensi Seeds, he bailed Neville out of jail and purchased Neville's house that we refer to as Cannabis Castle, and purchased the Holland Seed Bank and all of its genetic supply, and gave Neville a job working at his own company. That's technically my castle, actually.
Oh, that
was mine. That was not Neville's castle. Neville inspired that.
That's a nice castle, though. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, that was my Bel Air home. But after visiting Neville in the Netherlands, I realized that I needed a mansion full of weed, and worked my way towards replicating what I saw.
I heard one story. I heard one story about Neville that I wanted to ask her. I'll throw it up on screen real quick, which is this is my favorite Neville story. And of the Neville stories, there's a ton of Neville stories out there, but this one is my favorite, and I'll just kind of read it real quickly. This was about Neville caught wind of high-quality hash crops that were grown in the fields surrounding the holy city of Mazar-i-Sharif. I'm sure I'm saying that horribly wrong. I apologize, in Afghanistan. But following the Soviet invasion of '79. So basically what this article is alleging, and what this story alleges, is Neville an Afghani came to him in Holland and told him that the crops are being destroyed around the holy city. So he was smuggled into Pakistani refugee camp, where he made contact with a Mujahideen commander known as Mr. Hashish. Struggling against the language barrier with 4 men pointing machine guns at him, the king of cannabis, as High Times dubbed him, eventually managed to persuade Mr. Hashish to send a squad of his men 280 miles into Soviet-occupied territory and come back with 2 kilos of healthy Mazari seeds.
Mazari Sharif.
Okay.
Yeah, Mazari.
So,
Mazari seeds.
This is like kind of strain hunters-esque, before the strain hunters were kind of traveling the globe to, get strains, if you will, or whatever. But I love this story that if you could just imagine this dude backpacking into Pakistan, basically using sign language with, fucking like the Taliban.
Well, interpreters.
Yeah, totally, being like, I need the best hash seeds, and the guy's like, no one's ever come out here looking for hash seeds. Who the fuck are you? And what's going on? But I love this story, and I was going to ask you, do you have any stories that may never have been told, or anything, something nobody knows about Neville Wild Stories?
Not so much like that. I mean, I believe that he did go to Afghanistan. I thought it was Afghanistan. But that photo of him that you shown on the screen, where he's standing in front of all that hash, he has stated that he regretted taking, because it became his wanted poster later on. It was actually the back of the 1987 seed catalog. That photo there's a picture of the seed catalog opened flat and scanned, if you will. And unfortunately, that was probably a bad move. It was an ego stroke at the time, but it wasn't the smoothest idea in retrospect. Guys like Skunk Man Sam had already done that, though. Back in 1970, him and his wife, now of 52 years or so, were hippies that went from London to Morocco to Germany and hitchhiked all the way across Afghanistan and lived in India for a year collecting the genetics that went on to become things like Skunk One. And while I believe that Neville went and got land races, Neville was, you can quote him actually in Mishka's, she's an activist from France, that was kind of his former girlfriend. He did one of his last interviews with her, and in it he makes the comment that he realized that it was much harder to make a quality variety from land races than he thought, because he had gotten all these work varieties that I already mentioned, like skunk and haze and Durban and California orange and Hindu Kush and Northern Lights. And because of that, he was able to make a lot of strong combinations that became famous. I don't think right now that anybody would look at somebody who started growing, let's say in 1981 when he picked up the book, which isn't the case, and then it started a seed company 3 years later in 1984. I don't think they'd look at him and think, oh, what an accomplished, experienced young man.
Right.
They would be like, you're a joke. You have no experience. What are you talking about? And unfortunately, he got a lot of credit for other people's work. And back then, people like Greg and Sam, they wanted to use alias names. They didn't, if you tell on them, it was snitching. And that's really the whole point of this whole conversation that we're having today, because what ended up happening to Neville was the guy that he hired to send his seeds for him in America snitched him out. And unfortunately, Neville's case was sealed until 2003. So Neville didn't even know the real truth for the longest time. And for a while in the 90s and beyond, Neville, that's the guy. Neville went on to blame Skunk Man Sam for turning him in. And in 2018, I was on Instagram arguing with a really cool guy. We're still friends, but we were having a friendly discussion about rumors. And the rumor was he had is that Skunk Man Sam turned in Neville. And I was arguing it's BS. He didn't do that. He would never do that. There's no paperwork to support that. It's just, a heroin addict's fantasy. And he is pretty shocked. He went on pacer.gov, downloaded all of Neville's court documents for $29.60, and then wrote me back and said, hey, my apologies. You were right. I'll never repeat those rumors again. It wasn't Skunk Man Sam that turned him in. It was some guy named Raymond Anthony Kogo, who was the guy that was sending his seeds for him out of Michigan. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, oh, Todd, I downloaded the 2 indictments in the affidavits. I'll forward them to you, right now. And he sent me these. I have a print-up copy of them right here. But
we
he sent me
too.
these. I love you, bro. He sent me these affidavits, and, it really blew my mind because it completely summed up the story. It connected the dots that didn't make sense before. And for a long time, there was a lot of mystery about what happened to Neville, what happened to Cannabis Cups, what happened to the Holland Seed Bank, how did he get turned in? But all that came really clear when I got this affidavit.
Sure.
And, for the sake of this conversation,
real quick.
well, let me say this, though, before you interrupt me. Yeah. I have no dogs in this fight. I don't know this guy, Raymond Anthony Kogo. I never heard of him before this affidavit entered into my life. I've been a journalist for not just Grow Magazine, which I'm holding right now, which is nationally published. It's available in all Barnes and Nobles. I've been writing them for 5 years. I've had my photographs published in GQ. I've written for High Times. I've been an editor of Jack Herr's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, since '94. I mean, history and writing about the history of cannabis has been kind of in my blood for a long time. And I did not intentionally come after this guy. I just reported what I read in the affidavit and colored in the story around Neville. So please go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. And what I was going to say is tonight's podcast is somewhat of a read-along because we attached the documents in the subjects of the subject area of the video. So in YouTube and Twitch, you should be able to get a direct PDF, and if you want to download them or click them, and you can read along live, or I have some of it on the screen. But we're just going to kind of browse a little bit of it, and again, I read this myself, and I was just fucking fascinated because I was like, holy shit, like this is exactly what the fuck happened way back when, and it ties to Operation Green Merchant, which we'll get into a little bit later. But it was just like, this is a fucking amazing document, and yeah, I guess we'll go from there. And I will say this before we start. I don't personally have a beef against this guy either. I don't really fucking know this guy. I hate snitches. But after when he showed up in our comments, I was like, what the fuck? I can't believe the number of people who have come in my DMs or even in the comments recently before the show trying to tell me, like, oh, that guy knows what's up or whatever. And I'm like, that shit is unacceptable. Like, I have these documents in my fucking hand, and you want to tell me anything else? I'm not even going to listen to a word you have to fucking say. It's kind of crazy that people somehow still support snitches in this community. But beyond that, I guess I'll sum that up towards the end here. But I guess I wanted to dig in straight to the very first, the first affidavit, which is it's the affidavit of Raymond Anthony Kogo, and I think it kind of tells the whole story. Is there anything that you want to highlight in this, or how did you want to kind of go over this, Todd?
There's a few passages in this that really shred me when I read it. There was one, I believe it's in paragraph 10, if I remember right. He makes the comment that Neville told him to destroy the addresses of the people that he was sending the seeds to, but instead of doing so, he kept the addresses and instead turned 18 months worth of Neville seed customers over to the DEA. And then that happened sometime in like June of '89. And he says it in number 11. He says,
page 7 of the affidavit. Yeah.
Yes, sir. He says at the bottom of number 11, he says, in each case, I mailed the seeds to the addresses indicated on the lists I received. Although Shoemakers, which is Neville, told me to destroy these lists, I kept them as a record of my activities in support of his operations, which leads me to think, God, this guy right from the start wasn't loyal. What he set out to take Neville down from the very beginning. And that's something that really struck me because, not only, and this is why I take this so personally, I went to prison for 5 years rather than cooperate when I was prosecuted for growing pot in that castle that you showed a little earlier. I got busted with 4,116 plants in 1997. I fought this federal government for 3 years. They offered to basically, you won't go to jail if you will debrief and cooperate, and I chose prison. After sitting in prison for 18 months, they sent my lawyer in to ask me if I would debrief, and I said, fuck no. And I sat there for another 3.5 years. So this is something really that means a lot to me, and it's not just Neville that got hurt by this. It was
a little loud, sorry.
But it was the thousands of people that were turned in with the addresses and the quantities of seeds they got. Because initially we thought that Operation Green Merchant happened because the DEA went to grow stores and followed growers home and put together a case. But that's not what happened. The DEA and all these various police departments had the names and addresses of the people who purchased the seeds from Neville as supplied to them by Kogo. And they organized and followed them around and went after them. And one of the things that this thing doesn't say is if he got paid for this, because back in the day, if you cooperated or if you dropped a dime, you could get a percentage of the forfeitures. That was really common during the drug war. So there's a possibility that this guy Kogo got paid for destroying all those lives, all those boats, all those businesses, all those homes that were raided, all the cash that was confiscated, because he was the source of the original information. As we know from this affidavit, there's a high probability that he got compensated for that information.
Sure. Well, I just want to read the very first page of this whole thing. I'm not going to read this whole affidavit because it's 29 pages or 60 pages actually, but this first thing just sums it up. My full name is Raymond Anthony Kogo. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, October 20, 1957. I was educated in public schools in the United States, graduated from high school in Livonia, Michigan, 1975. Until an on-the-job accident caused disabling injuries to my back, I worked as a bricklayer and cement man. For almost a year and a half, I was the U.S. distribution agent for the Seed Bank. I also distributed liquid fertilizer. I have cooperated with the United States Drug Enforcement Administration in its investigation of the activities of Neville Martin Shoemakers and others.
And others.
No charges have been made against me as a result of the facts related herein. So, I mean, it's right in the first fucking page. He says who he is. This is his affidavit. And he says that he cooperated against, Neville right fucking here and others in the very first page. That's the first thing that I highlighted.
Don't miss that next line. I fully appreciate the fact that my statements have the effect of incriminating me.
Right.
This guy's never done a day in jail.
They never went to jail, and this is also why to your point of it's like it's interesting that they kind of let this play out. But one of the other things that I highlighted in here, a few of the other things that I highlighted in here was on page 3, which I'll pull up on screen also. He kind of talks about his trips to Amsterdam and when he got started. and he sort of spills the beans on the whole process of sort of how everything worked over there. It's during my visit to Shoemaker's. Shoemaker excused himself to go to the post office. Shortly thereafter, he returned with a large duffel bag filled with hundreds of envelopes. And it just kind of, it's one thing to essentially say, here's the list of what I had, but he also gave up like everything that was going on in Holland when it had no jurisdiction. He's talking about the number of lights in the grows and how big the grows were and everything else. I thought that was a little bit strange. But
Well, he had to fully debrief, and the thing is that when you look at the date on this affidavit, it is actually January 1994. If you look at the signature on page 10, he's talking about bringing them the information in May of '89. So
Right.
they kept this stuff. They kept him as an active confidential informant. 1990, 91, 92, 93, and he didn't come in and debrief, on a sworn affidavit till 94, which is a pretty long time.
To collect
He
lists.
got away with doing this anonymously until the case was unsealed in 2003, and I think it was only then that Neville really realized what happened to him. And don't overlook this other part too, because he made a comment initially that he was getting paid to do it for Neville, but what ended up happening is he traded the recipe for nutrients from Neville in the seed bank in lieu of him shipping the seeds to the American customers. So at that point, he was no longer getting paid whatever it was, I think $10 a package to send them. At that point, he really didn't have to keep his end of the deal, because once he got the nutrient formula from Neville, he was able to say, F Neville, I got mine. I don't have to continue doing anything for you.
Right. One
and
thing
that's
I
pretty
see
deep
here
too.
on page 7, right at the bottom half of the first paragraph, right, again where we're just looking at, it says, I mailed the seeds address indicated on the lists I received. Although the shoemakers told me to destroy these lists, I kept them as record of my activities in support of all his operations. And then right there in 12 on page 7, I would like to provide additional details as to what I observed at his marijuana seed business during my several visits to Holland and shit. It's almost like this affidavit, he's like, yeah, this is what I did, and I would like to give you more additional information. And it's, I mean, I'm not going to speculate that he was paid because we don't know, but it does lead to like, if this is your way of income, then fuck, you'd be like, I got more, I got some more, it's.
Can I say it like this though? I spent $380,000 fighting the fucking federal government in 97, 98, 99, with the help of the good graces of my friends and raising some money. And then I went to prison for 5 years and then spent another 2 years on probation. It was expensive to go through that. So this guy got paid just by not having to go through that.
Sure.
Just
That's
let's
fucking
keep it real.
insane. And then if you want to really blow everyone's mind here, go to page 9, what I have on the screen, right on section 15 there. I'm just going to read this. In March of 1989, after I had already been handling orders for Neville, I was arrested for growing marijuana by the authorities in the state of Michigan. I was convicted and sentenced to serve 6 months in jail. At my wife's request, Neville lent us, I say Neville, but it's shoemakers, lent us $30,000 for legal expenses. Dude paid for his fucking,
Liar.
So basically, this is Neville's guy in the States to do his distribution for his U.S. orders. The dude gets pop growing. He asked for 30 racks in fucking 1987, which is fucking, I don't know, 50,000
A lot of money.
80,000 a day maybe. And it's like to fight the shit. He does 6 months. And then he says, while on a work release program, I learned that the company that was handling the distribution of my liquid fertilizer, Superior Growers Inc., had stolen the formula and was cutting me out of the picture. This and other things, which we've never determined what other things are, led me to go to law enforcement authorities and agreed to cooperate in providing information about my dealings with the shoemakers. So they got you a fucking sweetheart deal. You had a fucking 6 month term. 6 months in the 80s, in 87 or whatever for growing weed, or 89 for growing weed was a fucking good lawyering job. And now you
Don't miss that next line.
Yep.
That next line, he says, at the time I did this, the authorities here were not, to my knowledge, aware of my serving as shoemaker's distribution agent for the seed bank's marijuana seed sales.
It's fucking crazy.
So they didn't even have him for distributing
they
seeds.
didn't know.
They had him for just being stupid.
Yep. And then during this affidavit, there's a few other people, which they're not necessarily the focus, but there's a few other people that were caught up in this. And they're probably people that I don't know if Kogo gave them up or not, but there was 2 additional snitches included in this affidavit. One was Robert Sullivan, and another one was
Those might have been cops, by the way. Some of the sworn affidavits in the long affidavit
They
I sent you
were these two
were
were.
police
This guy
officers.
says that he had the deli. He ran Sullivan's Drive-In, family-owned restaurant, and his brother and I inherited the restaurant in '83 upon my death. What these affidavits imply is that they're pointing to the return address, the bubble mailer, the way that the seeds were mailed, pointing to Kogo, the way that he packaged it. So Kogo gives up like the information of how he did it, and they're saying this matched the way that he sold it essentially. But yeah, there was two of them. There's the Sullivan and then Joseph Soblinski, who was another guy. I think he was indicted into the grand jury, but he had 59 plants that he was growing, and he turned snitch also.
I think he's from Louisiana. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I was going to ask you, because I'm a little confused, is this was all brought in the District of Louisiana. Kogo was out of Michigan, and
So
it
if you
seems
start-
like most people
Let me explain
were in
easily.
Louisiana.
No, so check it out. So there was a ambitious DEA agent out of Louisiana who was actually going after Neville. He made a few purchases, on record, for the DEA from Neville. But I guess he would get these seeds, and other than a postage stamp saying where they were mailed out of, they didn't have return address, things like that. So he didn't have that piece of the puzzle. But he was doing an investigation in Louisiana, and what happened is when they raided people that were growing cannabis, according to the affidavits I've read, and there was any connection to them possibly have gotten those seeds, if there was a High Times magazine, if there was a catalog from the Holland Seed Bank there, that was enough to have them say, hey, we're doing this other case, we want you to cooperate with us if you want us to go easy on you. I mean, it's not it's hard to say no to the DEA when they're saying, I was facing a 10-year mandatory minimum, and I still said no. But for a lot of people, man, I didn't have kids, I wasn't married. It was a little easier for me to just say, F it, I'll go do the time. But when you have a wife and your family and everything, and they lean on you, they crush people. They really crush people. So I feel bad for the people that got busted and got leaned on and tried to save their life. But for someone like this, who just on his own accord went and turned in Neville, and you saw the lists of names and addresses in the affidavit that he turned in. It's just remarkable. And that's why I think there probably was some monetary motivation behind it, other than just what? He was already on a work release program on a 6-month sentence. I mean, it wasn't like he wasn't in a situation where he had to go turn Neville and these people in. He
Right.
did it on his own accord.
And
we'll never know what his real motivation was, because
it's all over this shitty fertilizer stuff, which is fucking amazing to me. And I just want to kind of show everybody, this was the most amazing, scariest part. Because when this dude showed up in the chat, I'll show some of his stupid shit he threw up in the chat real quick. But he started throwing up some dumb shit in the chat about like DEA, like giving you addresses of DEA and shit, and Todd's lying about this or that. And I was just like, the guy doesn't change his name. He uses his name. He almost uses the shit as a badge of honor. And I was kind of like, this dude is full on, like, just flaunting the fact that he does what he does. If you look at like his Twitter, it shows like here's his Twitter. It shows that the Kogo fertilizer is used extensively by legendary seed bank of Holland. It's like, bro, you ratted them all out. How the fuck are you gonna put that on your Twitter handle? That's just insane to me, But the guy has some balls.
He hated Neville. He hated, and I think he was jealous of Neville. And realistically, it doesn't give him justification for ruining all these other people's lives. But he stated to me in some of the discords I've had with him on YouTube videos, because he's been harassing me since I wrote this article about Neville years ago. I mean, every chance he gets, he harassed me. And I get it, shoot the messenger, but it's not really going to change the fact that this is his affidavit and he did these things. So, live
Right.
with your resume is all I have to say with that. But, it blows my mind when I discovered this guy's name and I looked on social media and saw Kogo's nutrients and realized he was following me on every social media platform. And he's come out and said that he thought he should be given a medal because Neville was a piece of shit. And he did the world a favor turning this liar and heroin addict and alcoholic in. And I don't agree. I mean, you can be pissed off at Neville. You could do some bad business deals with you. You know, Greg complained about him. Skunk Man Sam complained about him. Ben Dronkers complained about him. Alan Dronkers complained about him. Arian Roscom complained about Neville. Names anyone he's worked with that he hasn't broken up with in a really horrible way. So obviously Neville had some issues, but you know,
None of those people went to the DEA, though. You know what I mean? Like,
right. It's not justification to turn them in for no freaking reason, and to turn in all those addresses. I mean, the thing that willfully is so diabolical is that he saved the addresses knowing that he was going to do this someday. You know, like his full intention from the very first package he shipped of Neville seeds was to hold on to this information, knowing that it would give him leverage later on.
And the reason that we know that it was such a long time thing is in the 1990 affidavit. There's not a whole lot in this affidavit, but the affidavit to Carl Pike, and he's the DEA agent. In the very end of it, he's talking about he's building his case. This is 1990, and the very end of it, let's see, page 5.
1990 is the indictment, so I sent you an indictment from 1990, which was one, and then there was a superseding indictment
94.
from 1994.
Right,
correct. And this indictment, this affidavit happened in between, because what they were doing was building their case, and this guy was absolutely a confidential CI. It's called confidential informant, because he was protected for almost 5 years, you know,
right.
in 1989.
His name appears, I think, for the first time in this 1990 affidavit, page 5, section 14. Raymond Anthony Congo has been interviewed and has admitted that he worked for the shoemakers and distribution of marijuana seeds in the United States. So that pinpoints it in the affidavit is back to 1990, but he didn't do his affidavit until 1994. And he also got
no
busted
doubt they were using him.
You know, got busted in, I think, by his own admission, his own affidavit, it was 87 or 89 that he got busted?
88. It would have been 88 or 89 because some shit went down in the winter of 89 because that's when he got the money and everything. Somebody else had contacted me that supposedly knew him and said that he didn't get busted for growing per se. He got busted for trying to smuggle hash into a jail to his friend. And if that's the case, Jesus, he's stupid.
Yeah, either way,
but,
you're busted.
Yeah, either way, it's not a good look. I've gotten busted for growing pot too, so that's not necessarily, you know, it is what it is. You can't really, but smuggling hash into a jail is not the next level dumb if that's really what went down, you know. And to think all these people ate shit because, you know, he was pissed off about a nutrient deal, that's just crazy.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened to Neville then after the fact. So, well, actually, before we even talk about Neville, let's talk about Operation Green Merchant. I want to throw something up on the screen. This is the effect of Operation Green Merchant. I got this, right here. This is what happened.
That was originally a list published in High Times magazine is where I copied and pasted that
Green Merchant, which happened... the guy was sentenced. He was busted in 88 or something like that. Within 6 months, he had a 6-month term, but then he got pissed off during his jail release, so then he turned snitch. And then in October of 89, so within 6 months of him, you know, basically either going snitch, this happens. Operation Green Merchant. And I mean, if you haven't heard of this was a big fucking deal. This is a huge fucking deal. Just look at the amount of, you know, assets, you know, $9 million in total assets stolen. I don't want to say seized. I want to say stolen. 16 store owners arrested. So essentially all they had to do right here was connect the dots. They were like, all right, we got Kogo's list. All we got to do now is go to, you know, all these growers, follow them to whatever grow store they go to, and bang. Now we got the conspiracy on the grow store and this huge federal fucking thing where they wrapped up all these fucking people. All the grow stores fucking went down. I shouldn't say all, but a shit ton.
Quite a few.
It was like three-quarters of them were affected, I would say. And it was a huge fucking deal. Look at 443 arrests of private citizens for marijuana cultivation. If you want to give somebody dipshit of the day, it's got to be Anthony Raymond Kogo because, like I say, this is a direct result of this guy saying, hey, I got Neville's list.
Oh, it's absolutely turned him in. I mean, when you look at it, was like 47 states. And when you think about his list of sending seeds, it makes perfect sense. You know, and he also mentions on page 9, paragraph 15, it says in March of 89, after I'd already been handling orders for shoemakers, I was arrested for growing marijuana. So that would have put it right in 89. And then I believe that he, a few months later, went to them sometime between 89, sometime between March of 89 and June-ish, because I believe I read somewhere else that he went to the cops in either May or June, and that's when it started this investigation. And then 5 months later, June, July, August, September into October, they organized Operation Green Merchant, and no question, with Kogo's lists, they went after everyone. They took down Sensibilia Tips magazine, which was a cultivation-only magazine that was based out of Oregon at the time, published by a gentleman named Tom Alexander. And they went after his grow shop. They went after his publication.
Went after
They
High
seized.
Times.
Yes, they did. They seized businesses without pressing charges on the businesses, and they stole, like you were saying, property just based on basically not charging people, which is which in my opinion is tantamount to theft. It's one thing if people are doing things wrong and you bust them and take their shit, but if you just take their shit and let them leave, you're kind of a pirate.
I mean, yeah, that would sums up to me the Bush administration, which is more smash and grab kind of a fucking deal. Like they were more gangsters than fucking lawmen. It was like
Don't forget,
yeah.
George Bush 1 was the head of the CIA from in the mid '70s until Jimmy Carter fired him, and then he went to go work for Eli Lilly Pharmaceuticals, which was owned by Dan Quayle's dad. So the reason we had Dan Quayle as vice president for those 4 years is because he's probably doing a solid to the kid's old man. All reality. I mean,
right.
So you can't underestimate the power of Bush, in my opinion. He was a very powerful dynasty on a lot of levels. I think a lot of people don't realize that the head of the CIA became the president for pretty much 12 years because, if you want to be president for 16 years, you definitely are going to go to California and hire a beloved Republican actor to play the part of president while you're really running shit for the first 8 years of your presidency, and then you just take over for the second 8 years. But he only managed to get 4 more years because, war hit the fan, and, it is what it is. But, man, they had a vengeance for cannabis users. But I unfortunately see it as a big cash grab because by creating this really big boogeyman in the war on drugs, it released billions of dollars in funding that were really, I mean, you can't legislate morality, and there's a whole lot of hypocrisy when you got cigarette smoking, alcohol drinking, DEA agents going after acid eating, pot smoking hippies. I mean, get real.
Not long after this too was Operation Pipe Dreams, where then after all the head shops and shit, that was just the Bush administration's DEA was a little bit fucking out there. They were out for weed, like it was kind of crazy.
That was Bush too.
Oh,
that was his son's vengeance, okay. Really. Yeah,
ridiculous.
That was Junior.
But back to this kind of story here, I'm interested in. So what ends up happening to Neville is they do this grand jury, right? And they're trying to essentially get extradition for this dude in Holland. That's, as far as I know, he never came to America, or if he did, not when he was wanted at this time.
America.
Okay, so
Neville did for a short amount of time and split.
Okay, so but at this time they're trying to build this case to extradite this guy to America. And as this is kind of parallel to a lot of shit that's happening today in some of the news with some of the Snowden stuff and some of the Assange stuff, and so it's like he's on a minor level right there with these guys. So they're trying to build that up, and he makes the mistake of going back home to to Australia to be with family, and
picked up by Interpol.
They snatch him up. Interpol snatches him up because America wants him, and just like many that were to come after him, like Mark Emery and such, and the Richard, I can't remember his name, Carlsbad, I believe, the Heaven Stairway guy, and there's been one after the other, but they wanted to snatch him up, and they threw him in Australian jail, and for some reason, correct me if I'm wrong, he was able to make bail in that scenario and get out a few days or moments before the U.S. was going to come pick him up.
So supposedly, whenever there's a situation, Gypsy Nirvana, who was selling seeds, managed to successfully fight extradition to America when he's picked up at an airport in a foreign country. He had to sit in jail for a while as he fought them, but it turns out they didn't really come after him with the vengeance that they thought they were going to, and he ended up going home to England. But in the situation with Neville, they picked him up, and he fought extradition, and it dragged on. And for some reason, he got a favorable release from a judge, and he used that to split. really immediately split. And there was some rumor that basically the judge's wife took a liking to Neville, or for some reason, and basically wouldn't give her husband, who was the judge, any loving if he didn't give him bond. And
I
Neville
told you
used the
there's Neville
opportunity
stories, dude. There's Neville
there
stories for
are
days.
funny ones, yeah.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there, so this is only I don't have an affidavit for this, so I don't know. But he split the country and he went back to Holland and he moved back into his old cannabis castle. And Neville, was really fortunate. Ben Dronkers is, hands down one of the best cannabis businessmen that's ever been in the industry. He's a raging success. NC Seeds became easily the number one seed company for the longest time. He opened up hemp flax. He did the hash museum. He did another museum in Barcelona. Ben has been a monster when it comes to business. And initially, when he got all those varieties from Neville, it became Sensi Seeds. Neville worked for Sensi Seeds 1991, 92, 93, 94. He didn't have a falling out with Ben until I would say 95 into 96. And that's when he switched camps and he went to work with Aryan and Aryan's assistant at the time named Scotty, now calls himself Shanti Baba. But back in the day, 94, 95, I just knew him as Scotty. Scotty was really cool.
Greenhouse, right?
Yeah, it was Greenhouse Seeds because, the first year I went to Amsterdam in 1994, Aryan wasn't really selling seeds. He was, had a beautiful coffee shop on Tolstraat, and Ben was selling seeds, and Ben killed it. I mean, in 1994, Ben fucking killed it, and he made $1 zillion. And suddenly, when we went back in 1995, everybody had a seed company. They were like, every single booth was a seed company, and because people figured it out real fast. And that's when I saw Greenhouse Seeds really start in 1995. And then there was this gentleman named Igmar who had started White Widow, and he befriended Aryan and Scotty, and he basically sold the variety to them, and they started breeding with that. And at the same time, when Neville left Ben in a big dispute, he brought his genetics as much as he could over to Aryan, and they started making things at the same time. Neville was already making things like Neville's Haze, which was already on the menu at the greenhouse in 1995, if I remember right for sure. I was smoking it in 96, the whole year I lived there. I lived in Amsterdam from November of 95 until really January of 97. So I really loved the place, a lot of good people there. I'm certainly not trying to do this interview to badmouth any of my friends in Holland. They've been inspirations to me for decades, to say the least. Even Neville, as bad as his reputation was in dealing with some of the other people, I think he inspired many of us. Oh, yeah. And I thank him for it.
He's definitely an inspiration to me. I'll say this, sorry to cut you off, but I'll say this, it's like history repeats itself. All the breeders now have all these stupid cat fights all over the fucking place or whatever, but when you go back to the origins of this stuff, a lot of the guys that started all of these bigger names are like legendary names to me. There's like a lot of them still don't like each other, or they had some sort of problem along the way or something like that. But I totally get it and I respect it. And there's part of me where it's like, even though somebody like Neville, who I never met the man, but I've heard through legend that he didn't really honor deals very well and shit. And I don't really like people like that. No. But somehow I had this fondness for Neville because he was a part of the origin of this whole fucking idea. He's the first guy to put an ad in a High Times magazine. And like I kind of touched on it earlier for seeds, but he had a catalog for seeds in High Times magazine. He pushed the envelope like nobody. And then we didn't really touch on this, but High Times got pulled into that grand jury, and they were challenged, and I think they won on grounds of free speech. But it was High Times was challenged to be a part of this whole conspiracy and brought down with the whole thing because they ran the ad. And when you talk about setting precedents or building stuff up, like this is big time stuff. This is the foundation of what the fuck I do and a lot of people have done. And I'll say this, there's a ton of people that do this now that don't even know the history of this shit. They don't even know the origins of these people or the history of this game and what a lot of these people went through. And with that, I'll kind of bring it over to another side question that I had, which is Sam the Skunk Man. I don't know how well you know him, but Neville thought it was Sam the Skunk Man that kind of ratted him out for a while. I don't know if he actually never ever learned the truth and saw these documents before he passed. I assume he did, but he kind of always thought it was Sam the Skunk Man. But Sam is another enigma, if you will. There's not very many photos of him that exist, if any. He's kind of doesn't show his face publicly. He is, the origin of a lot of these strains. A lot of people, I think Steve from High Times wrote an article saying that he thinks he's a spook. There was a bunch of trolls
Yeah,
early on
Hager wrote.
that said
Yeah,
that.
I got a comment about Hager writing, though. He's been a mouthpiece for Neville and all.
That's to say, I
Unfortunate.
attached the article that Hager did write about Neville, saying, or I'm sorry, about Sam the Skunk Man to the subject of this too, because I wanted to ask you your thoughts on it, because he goes on to say that he was trolled early on, and they thought that Sam was like part of the DEA, and he set up the origins of the Cannabis Cup were set up to track growers and bust people, and it turns out to be a whole load of bullshit. But Steve kind of put that out there, but he always said, like, I don't know who this guy is, because he goes by like 3-4 different names, and you know what I mean. But I never met the man. I don't know the man. He's another guy that I have a shitload of respect for, but it sort of gets into this muddy mess for me. So for this younger crowd, if you will, what can you tell us about Sam the Skunk Man and sort of who he is? Because he's also been pigeonholed into the most corporate man alive. He works for Bayer, and he's the devil, and you got to watch out for these guys and shit. So I'll give you the floor with that long question.
Okay, so Skunk Man Sam, I'm going to say up front, I've known him since 1994. To this day, he's one of my best friends, and he's been married to the same woman now since they're celebrated 51 or 52 years together. He's one of the most stable, solid people I've ever met. He, has a family, has kids, and he's probably one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. And I mean that in all sincerity. The guy's a genius almost.
He had the first license in Holland, correct?
Yeah, I could talk about him for days. I'm actually writing an article about him and Rob Clark for Grow. It's going to be kind of long, but it's titled Ants Under the Skyscraper, The True History of the European Seed Market. And the ants under the skyscraper are all the guys like Neville and Flying Dutchman and SSSC and Ben Dronkers with Sensi Seed Club, and Wernard with Positronics. These were all the little guys that he went and sold his genetics to, and they built seed companies that we all know about to this day. What they didn't understand about Skunk Man Sam, and a lot of people use alias names. I mean, I'm going to help my friend right now, but the publisher of this magazine runs around and introduces himself as his name is Guy, and his name's Steve. Yep, and it's to this day, a lot of people, don't want, he's not going to be mad at me for saying this, but a lot of people realize that there's guys like Kogo everywhere, and you got to watch your ass, unfortunately. And it's been hard for a lot of people to trust in this industry, much because of what we're talking about in this show. So Skunk Man Sam actually went under a couple names. I mean, he got the nickname Skunk Man because he made Skunk #1 in 75, 76. And the Skunk Man Sam was because of Uncle Sam, and they were goofing on Uncle Sam. And then he was an acid-eating hippie in the early 70s. And he used to wear, he's a big guy too, he's like 6'3", and he used to wear like a jester's hat all the time when he would go to these LSD parties, and they have bells on it. So people called them jingles. So when he used a fucking alias name, he used part of his Skunk Man Sam nickname, which was Sam, and he used jingles spelled backwards. Yep. So it was Sam Selendage, or however you pronounce jingles backwards. And that's how he introduced himself to people. And he's been a student of cannabis for a long time. We just recently republished an article about breeding from 1979. It was published in a magazine called Blotter, that was initially published by the gentleman who went on to publish the book, The Psychedelic Encyclopedia, who was his neighbor on the mountain where he lived in Santa Cruz in the 70s. And his other neighbor was the guy that made Original Haze. And Sam was, right place, right time, had good people around him. But he wrote an article about breeding back in 1979 that is still absolutely amazing. And he was trying to teach other people how to do this. And it really demonstrates his depth of knowledge, really going way back. I mean, long before Neville even picked up a Mel Frank grow book in 81 and got inspired, Sam was laying down really deep breeding techniques in an acid magazine years before, which, incredible. So Sam had also started Sacred Seeds. he grew up in like LA, Hollywood area in the 60s when LSD was still legal and stuff, and met his girlfriend, and they sold all their possessions and split to Europe and did that little hippie trail all the way from London to India where they lived for a year. And along the trail, he documented and collected cannabis genetics the whole way and brought them back to America and moved to Santa Cruz and started breeding some of the varieties we know today. And really, the guy's a genius. I don't know another way to put it. I mean, incredible. And he was following the adaptation of Marinol, which was a synthetic cannabinoid, dronabinol, and he followed the legalization of it. And he saw an opportunity to create a generic equivalent to the synthesized dronabinol. So in 1986, for those listening, Marinol became legal. Marinol was synthetic THC suspended in sesame oil, encapsulated in gelatin, and was sold in 2.5, 5, and 10 milligram pills. And they expected this to be a big deal. And this is also why I think the drug war against cannabis in the 80s was somewhat motivated by pharmaceutical companies lobbying the federal government to go after cannabis, because they were studying the medical utility of cannabis, and they knew full well what we all know now, and that's that cannabis is a healing agent. So they were trying to basically patent that, and they did so with Marinol at first. And what Sam did is he country shopped. He realized that Holland would allow him to set up a cannabinoid research facility that was a pharmaceutical company, and he applied as a pharmaceutical company that wanted to research cannabinoids and terpenes, which is pretty deep. And he got a license, and none of the ants under the skyscraper, if you will, understood anything about medical cannabinoids or terpenes, or they were just they were young hippies wanting to make money. You know, they weren't at all thinking along the lines of the scientific exploration and like all the work that I can explain next that they ended up doing. So he got what he called hortifarm, which was horticultural and pharmacy melted in together, and he hired, of all people, Robert Clark, who was the gentleman who authored Marijuana Botany in 1981. The book is now in print for 40 years at this point and has never been changed.
Yeah, every grower should have this book. We had Rob
Yeah.
come to the warehouse. He signed the wall. Literally had him autograph the wall.
Then you know. So Rob's a fucking genius, right? So in 1970s, Rob wrote a book called The Botany and Ecology of Cannabis. It was what he used to graduate the University of Santa Cruz. I have a copy of it. His old college roommate gave it to me one Christmas. And Rob printed this, and this is how he met Skunk Man Sam, because Skunk Man Sam bought a copy of this book. And when Rob realized it was local, he went over there to deliver it himself and maybe make a friend. And because he wanted to get weed and seeds, and he's truly passionate about cannabis on many levels. So he went and made a friend, and it became his best friend for life. And Rob's career took off. I mean, Rob, after 1981, became like one of the biggest experts on cannabis cultivation in the world. And when Skunk Man Sam got this license, he immediately went to to Rob, come work with me. So they really were incredible, because by doing so and raising millions of dollars, which they did, he was able to send Rob around the world collecting genetics. And, in most other countries other than America, seeds have been legal. They haven't been made illegal. There's no drug content on the seeds. There's no cannabinoids present. If there is a little bit, it's contamination, and it won't amount to much. So they could literally go anywhere they wanted, and they did. And they collected genetics and brought it back. And they didn't just bring back drug varieties. They also collected industrial hemp varieties. And they started the Industrial Hemp Association, the International Hemp Association, in 1994, and they started printing journals on 100% hemp paper and sending it to universities for peer-reviewed articles, because they were trying to get like the academics, if you will, to start taking cannabis seriously. And they even created hemp educational kits that had like pieces of hemp cloth and wax crayons and hemp seed oil and like all these little cool things you can make out of cannabis. I bought a whole shitload of kits and used to give them away. And it was fantastic. These guys were groundbreaking. And when they got their license in the Netherlands and Hortifarm suddenly became a thing, and everybody being the seed company merchants that were around them that had been buying seeds from Skunk Man Sam by the kilo for many years, they were like, what's up with this? How does the American have a license? There's something fishy about this. And if they had known better, if they had understood cannabinoid medicine or anything about dronabinol, they would have been able to go apply for the same thing, and they would have been able to get a license. But they would have had to adhere to the license, which meant that they had to destroy all the cannabis. And they had to be accountable for the weight and stuff, just like metric is now in a way.
Pretty much so.
But they were allowed to keep the seeds. They were allowed to, vibrate the cannabis before they destroyed it. And we got the book Hashish out of this with all of the seeds, the screen seed sizes, and it's an incredible book. If you don't have it, please go pick it up. It's fucking awesome. That came out in 1998 by Rob Clark with, of course, Skunk Man Sam in it. But when this hit and his real name, David Watson, became known, all of these people, mostly the Dutch seed merchants, were not Bruning, Ben Dronkers, Neville, they all started these friggin' rumors that these guys are spooks. A lot of it was xenophobic because realistically they didn't like that Americans were moving in and reshaping the scene. Nothing against my Dutch friends, but I think the Holland seed scene would have been in a big different situation if those guys had to start from scratch and take Thai and Colombian and Moroccan and Indian varieties and Afghan varieties and come up with their own Northern Lights and Hazes and Skunk ones and Durbans and everything else. They would have been decades behind because they inherited a bunch of really worked varieties from America that, I point out all the time, there ain't no skunks in Europe. It is literally a North American animal. So there's no reason a Dutchman or a guy from England would smell cannabis and think skunk, because they've never fucking seen a skunk outside of Pepe Le Pew on a cartoon, and they've never smelled one because there are none of these animals in Europe. So in Europe, they would smell a nasty Afghan and think cheese. And in Holland, they called it skunk because they had his skunk one. That's the reason, because when he brought it over in 85 or 84 and they started getting the seeds from it, making seeds of it, they called it what it was, which was skunk one. And it's funny because I lived in Amsterdam for a year and I was getting high in positronics one day, and one of my Dutch friends, he had a joint and he lit it. He was already high and he was like, something about the skunk is so Dutch. And I was like, really? Have you ever even seen a skunk? And he looked at me for a minute and he goes, no. And I said, do you even have them in your zoos? And he looks at me, he says, I don't think so, actually. And I said, can I tell you why? And he said, yes. And I said, it's because it's a North American animal and the skunk you're smoking is from Santa Cruz. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, man, really. And I think these guys gave a really big boost to it, but it created a lot of jealousy. And, I once asked Ben Dronkers if he was going to send the Sensi seed genetics into Phylos for, genetic, mapping. And he said, why? So we can prove all the genetics came from Rob and Sam? And I was like, that's fucked up. But I completely understand that that's not what he wants to do. And, so these guys really, in a way, had to overcome the shit that Neville threw out. I mean, the rumors that Neville spread, in my opinion, were unconscionable. They're akin to calling somebody a pedophile or a thief or name the worst thing, because, at the time saying that somebody was, no disrespect to the DEA that are actual DEA agents by choice, but to say somebody was a DEA agent was pretty much the worst thing you could accuse them of, right. And that's what Neville accused Sam of. And it was really, really, really wrong of him, in my opinion. And even after 2003, when the case was unsealed and Neville had absolute proof, the affidavit, that it was his own employee, Raymond Anthony Kogo, that turned him in, he still badmouthed Skunk Man Sam, because in my opinion, him and Ben and Bernard and all of them, they didn't really understand Hortifarm. They didn't understand what they were doing. And not to be rude to any of those guys, they've been my friends, but they didn't get it. They just weren't on that level. They've never put out books like Hemp Diseases and Pests or Cannabis Evolution and Ethnobotany or put out journals like the International Hemp Association. They've never done any of that. They just don't get it. And I don't have a problem with them not getting it, but to throw shade at these people like Rob and David, who have shared so much of their knowledge, of their research, of their genetics with the world, is really, to me, a disservice to their great work.
Sure, I agree with that, and I think it repeated itself a little bit because almost every kind of American at that time that kind of came over there, you would hear, "Oh, he's a spook." You know what I mean? It was, I think you having to Adam Dunn a little bit. He had his foolish name that he used that even encouraged it. It was some CIA name that he used or something, but everyone was like,
Wait a minute. So the CIA stood for Cannabis in Amsterdam,
Totally.
and it was so at the time in 1993. Doug, Adam, and this guy Dion, who were the first partners in it, they got basically a job from High Times to help produce the 1993 Cannabis Cup, which was still closed to the public. It was a private event. It would have been more expensive to rent this building space near Central Station for the event than it would be for the whole year. So they rented it for the whole year, and they started the CIA, which was really cool. It was Cannabis in Amsterdam. They secretly grew some weed, and they had like a kind of like a coffee shop vibe where they sold some grass and some hash, and and hung out, and it was pretty chill. It was really, for me, going to Amsterdam in 1994 was like visiting the future, because you walk into a coffee shop, you sit down, you light a joint, you make friends with strangers. You're not that worried about talking to them. It was something I never experienced in America,
Sure.
So this was like stepping into the future, and the CIA was really cool. And then Doug and Adam broke up with Dion because Dion was kind of a dick at times, and they created the KGB.
Yeah.
So the CIA became the KGB. That actually stood for, I think, no green bud or no good bud. And they started selling hemp clothes, which were really beautiful. Hemp Works was the store they opened up not too far from Central Station, and they made some really high quality clothing together for quite a while. And I believe they still work together, Doug and Adam, to a degree. I mean, I think Doug is still in Europe doing the clothing, and Adam is all but completely moved back to America.
Yeah, it turned into
10 years
Hoodlum,
ago.
I believe, and I think Hoodlum might have been
Yep.
bought out or something just very recently. But yeah, Hoodlum was awesome. I mean, Hoodlum was a part of Amsterdam. If
Yeah,
it was like you had to wear your
beautiful clothes.
Hoodlum and you had to fucking walk around Amsterdam. That was just part of the cup ritual. But
Dude, it was cold. It was so cold. I didn't know how cold it could be. When I moved there, we had the coldest weather in 100 years, and I fucking hated it, man. I joked that all the hash in Holland couldn't make me want to stay, but it's a beautiful place, and it's still really cool. Unfortunately, Christian government got in and kind of oppressed the cannabis industry, and the industry, when I was living there, it was legal to grow seeds, and in the late 90s, it became illegal to grow seeds. So all of the smart seed companies split and moved down to Spain, because Spain kind of had economic difficulties around that time. And there was, ironically, no laws against growing cannabis in Spain. So everyone went down to Spain
The big shift.
and started growing cannabis. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. The shift was huge. Unfortunately, it brings up the conversation that first appealed to me when I was listening to you, which was you saying that a lot of people don't realize the white labeling that goes on, and there's a real small group of large seed growers that make a majority of these seeds, and unfortunately, the genetics are not what they appear to be anymore. I mean, these seed companies will take Cali Mist from Serious Seeds and bring it down to Spain and just mix it together if you're lucky, outcross it to something if you're not lucky, and then call it Cali Mist and knock off Simon. Simon's a phenomenal breeder, one of my good friends, for over 25 years, makes great cannabis. I highly recommend his genetics, but unfortunately he's also been knocked off
Right.
by other Europeans for
I
the
have a
last 20 years.
I have a theory about that where it's like, I'm interested maybe on your take of it, but I don't want to talk about it in too much detail because I think it's still an active, ongoing thing. But Dynafem, which is a major distributor in Spain, like you said, the big shift kind of happened to Spain, and it stayed there for quite a while. And the Dynafem just very recently, in the past year and a half or something, their whole organization was sort of shut down by the cops or government or whatever it may be, and that created a huge gap in like this white label, this distribution market and everything. It allowed for a shit ton of these companies to rise up and sort of fill this void. It's still only 4 or 5 companies, but in a space that Dynafem kind of dominated in Europe, and since their closure, if you will, or their passing, if you will, and the emergence of that has come 10 to 20 fold more fakery fuckery shit than, you know what I mean? You have any
Than
thoughts
ever
on
before.
that?
Yeah, unfortunately in the seed game, the reason I call my company Authentic Genetics is because sincerely I felt like a lot of companies were slinging very inauthentic genetics, and I felt that way for a long time. I mean, Arian will be pissed at me for telling the story, but oh well, we're friends. Back in 1996, I was standing next to my friend Tom, who actually grew the pot that was an NL5 by Hayes. It won the 1996 hydroponic division of the Cannabis Cup under NL5 Hayes by Mist. And when it won, it wasn't Tom that walked up on the stage; it was Arian, because he had bought the weed, and he claimed that it was him breeding together the two most powerful varieties of cannabis at the time, which was Cali Mist and NO5, and making this great variety. And it wasn't. I mean, I had the cutting that won. I mean, I've been buying it at Tolstrot the whole year. It was some of my favorite weed.
I mean, that's the oldest story of the Cannabis Cup, I think. You know what I mean?
The Cannabis Cup's been a real joke for a long time. And, and it was dirt-grown weed put in the hydroponic cup because nobody knows shit. Like I ran into the guy that wrote the Canna Bible at the time. He was one of my good friends, Jason, and I'd been living there for a year, and he said, "What's the best stuff?" I said, "Man, smoke the NO5." And he was like, "I did, it's totally chemi, it's shit." And I was like, "Why would you say that?" And he was like, "Because it's in the hydro." And I was like, "Jason," I was like, "Not only is it not hydro, it was grown in fucking our biological soil from Positronics for 10 weeks without any nutrient amendments and clear watered the entire time. So it was basically flushed for 10 weeks as it grew." And I was like, "And you're telling me it was chemi?" I was like, "Dude, you clearly don't know what you're talking about." And he got so mad at me that he practically didn't talk to me for like months, but it was okay. But it's true. And Tom was really a good grower. Dude, he had one of the best crops I'd ever seen. He had 4 600-watt lights in a little space that was like 9 foot by 8 foot that he made like a little wood lean-to in one of his rooms, one of the bedrooms. And he had the 4 lights hanging in there, and he had 88 plants on each side, and he would rock it 5 weeks each. And he gave these things no pre-grow. His schedule was ridiculous. On the 15th, he cut clones, and they got 2 weeks to root, and whatever rooted, he cut 100 clones. He would take 88 of the best ones, plant them on the first, and rock them for 2 months. And cut them down, and his schedule was like that. And that's harvest. He harvested, his average was 16 grams a plant off 88 plants, over 1,400 grams under 1,200 watts of 0 days pre-grow. Like he put these little NO5s in there when they were like 4 inches tall, and they finished like I'd say about 30 inches tall, and were great, like my favorite bud. And it was funny because I didn't buy it from him because he used to sell it to Arian for $9.50 a gram at the time, Gilders. And Arian was doing this really cool MediWeed program that if you had a medical prescription like I did, he would sell you anything at 50% off. So he had NL5 Haze on the menu at 18, even though he was buying it at $9.50. So I could go in there and buy it at 50 cents less than he paid for it. And so I used to go buy the weed from Arian instead of from Tom. And, it was just that good. It was just, and the reason I found out that they entered it in the cup is because I helped trim that batch. And then I waited till he sold it. And then I went down to go buy some, and it was Scotty. And when I got back to the back counter, I was like, "Sell me some of Tom's shit." And he said, "Todd, we're bagging it up. It's for the cup." He said, "That's such a good crop." And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, that'll be cool." And then when we were in the milk vegan at 1, and I was standing with Tom, and I was like, and then I heard them list the full name of by Cali Mist. I just was like, "Sorry, bro." He's like, "I don't care, Arian's weed, he do what he wants with it, but I just laughed. And I brought it up to Arian, the little story one day, and he looked at me and he said, "Your memory is too good." But I've been friends with Arian for a long time too. People give him a ton of shit, but I've known Arian since '94. I know his wife, his kids, and he's always been a good person to me. And he doesn't deserve a lot of the shit that people give him for doing strain hunters. And people say that he's contaminating landrace varieties by giving these people genetics, and I think that those people have had contaminated genetics long before Arian showed up. So,
sure. Let me ask you this, and I think we're gonna have to kind of get to a wrap-up point here. But knowing what you know about the history of cups and seeing Cannabis Cups kind of evolve over the years, And now that there's a shit ton of them in different states and everything else, what cup or contest or what do you pay attention to? Is there one that you're like, okay, if this wins it, like maybe Emerald
The
Cup,
Emerald
there's so
Cup's
many
legit.
fucking entries. You got to win. If you win Emerald Cup, you got to win. Like it's a real.
The Emerald Cup is totally legit. I've been the judge in that many years, and it's completely legit. The flowers are blind, the solventless is blind. Now some of it is branded because the industry grew so fast, and initially they didn't have hydrocarbons in the contest. But I'm good friends with Tim Blake, the owner of the Emerald Cup, and we've had long conversations about hydrocarbons. And he allowed them to enter in 2017 or 18, maybe 2016. It's a little bit of a blur, but he got so many samples entered that they didn't have time to take them apart and to put them into anonymous packages for the judges like they do with the flower varieties and the solventless varieties. So he just moved forward doing it as a branded contest, and even in that, I'll say that I've been the judge in that many years in a row, and we're always really fair. There's no favoritism. We vote on aroma, taste, appearance, effect, and now we have a smaller score for like packaging because a lot of people put a lot of effort into packaging, and it's part of the experience. One of the things that we entered into was also price that I think we're going to do this year because there's a big difference between $100 gram of some really craft hash or solventless or whatever you want to call it compared to some $40 gram, and often they're competing together. So I think there has to be a little bit of weight where do you have a higher expectation for something that costs $100 over $40? The short answer is of course. So the judging has evolved with it. But I think the Emerald Cup has always been legit. You're never going to buy a win at that event. The Secret Cup was also an event that Jeremy and Dan, who are also two of my best friends, they started the Secret Cup because they thought the Cannabis Cup in Colorado was utter bullshit. And they realized these people didn't know what they were doing, and they thought the best people to be the judges were the actual people who made the hash. So the Secret Cup was unique, meaning that you could enter, but only the people that entered could be judges. And let's say you got 40 people who entered extracts, those would be the 40. So they would take the amount that they gave you, they would break it up into let's say 3/10 to 5/10 of a gram, so almost 1/3 to a half of a gram samples, and they would break it up into all 40 kits, and then everyone who entered would get a kit. I got a whole bunch of them sitting up there because I was a photographer for them year after year after year, and what would happen is everybody would get the kit and then basically try to vote for their own shit. But things would stand out, and by bringing these people together, they got to see what others were doing, and the innovation kind of came in. And I think the Secret Cup became an opportunity for hash makers to better their craft because they were able to bring it to a place and compare notes and compare techniques and share techniques, and it really made a huge difference. I remember in 2014 when we started pressing buds with hair straighteners and started making rosin. It was really good to have people come together. We held a Secret Cup in Barcelona at the Hash Marijuana Museum owned by Ben Dronkers. He graciously let us use the facility when we were in town for the Spanibus. And by sharing this technique with everybody in Spain, man, fucking rosin blew up overnight. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the kind of thing that, certain events can be really, truly inspirational, bring together the community. And I really support that. I would recommend everybody go to the Emerald Cup this year if they get a ticket. It's being held, I think, the 11th and 12th at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds. It'll be just the event, meaning just the booths and the experience. The actual contest is going to be pushed back till I think April or so, and they're going to give people time to bring their crops in a little longer and get their shit together. And I think they're going to have another event to announce the winners, maybe in LA if I heard Tim right.
Cool.
Last time we spoke. you
Very
know,
cool.
and then he's going to produce another event in LA. I like the Emerald Cup because it's an organic event. For the longest time, you could only enter if your products were, you know, organic, biological. Even nutrient companies that were based with salts couldn't be a vendor and stuff. They had a real high threshold of ethics, and I personally think that Tim is a really great. Tim Blake, the founder of the Emerald Cup, is really a great example of the people I knew. Like I first moved up to Mendocino County in summer of 1994 to grow weed, and when I moved up there, the community was different. There was a lot of organic, you know, hippies, and people prided themselves on like stewardship and like forestry, and like they cared about the land and the trees and stuff. And then after 215, everybody and their brother who wanted to make money and hide and grow cannabis moved up there under the color of medical and really trashed the place, clear cut, started poisoning the estuaries, you know, laying traps for animals. Fucking, it became a nightmare. I mean, when I first started visiting Northern California, man, you could leave your windows down, and if it rained while you were hiking, somebody might stop their car, roll your window up. Now you can lock your damn car up and go hiking. You come back, somebody broke your window and stole your shit. So the community changed a lot. And I don't think for the better, unfortunately. And Tim, though, on the other hand, was one of these guys that stayed true to his old hippie ways and was organic and really cared for the land and brought the community together. And I think he's one of the best examples of the old community, if you will, in the community today. And he's one of my heroes personally. I look up to the guy, and I think the Emerald Cup's a
The
really
Emerald
great
Cup's awesome every year. So yeah, I concur with that.
Yep.
But
Great opportunity to make friends and meet people. And,
sure,
and to
everyone should
network.
try to make it out if you can. But with that said, I think we're gonna wrap it up, man. There's a lot that we could say, but on the way out the door, I literally think I'll let you say anything you want to say as far as this Congo situation and all the rest of it. I've seen him follow you around a little bit and try to continue to troll, and every time you kind of comment, he's always right there. He's got a bunch of aliases. He'll probably re-show up in the chat and we'll re-delete his shit. But yeah, I say we're gonna sign this fucker off. But I seen it, and I'm gonna let you have the final say on whatever you want to say on the way out the door to, what happened. Not even what happened, but your great article and some of the bullshit you've had to deal with from this guy sort of trolling you back, and the fact that he's an active member of the industry is mind blowing.
Mind blowing. I'll take his criticisms as a compliment. I never set out to hurt his feelings, so to speak. I simply reported what I read in the affidavits, which we have read online tonight. This was not my fight. This was, not my, other than being somebody who was appalled by Operation Green Merchant and met Neville and knew some of these players personally and felt connected to it. I didn't have a dog in this fight. I just reported what I read. Right. And, him coming after me and trying to shoot the messenger, it doesn't exonerate him from what he did or what's in these pages. So it to me, I feel like it has nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? I started out writing a eulogy to an old friend. And, unfortunately, I got these documents right at the same time Neville passed away. So it all kind of coalesced spontaneously together. And I stand by what I wrote. I mean, I didn't make anything up. He's accused me of slander and all these things when all I did was report on what we read in this affidavit. Yeah, so I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm not trying to slander anybody. But, I think we are a resume. I'm really proud of the path I took through this. I'm really proud that I went to prison. I'm really proud I never cooperated. And I think the people that did, they don't deserve to be in part of this community. I think that, these documents speak volumes and that people should know their history, because if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So, let this be enlightenment. Do your own homework. Don't take our word for it. I'm not the final authority. I'm just another community member who wanted to know the truth, and that's it. So thanks for taking the time to do the show tonight. And thanks for everybody who watched this, take a minute to listen. And please look into what we've talked about. I think it's important, not just to the past, but potentially to your current future and liberty.
Yes, sir. Once again, thanks. Another amazing episode, Todd McCormick. Give him a follow, Todd P. McCormick on Instagram. Todd, thank you, bro. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for your time, man.
Peace to you guys. Have a great night tonight. Thanks again.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank
you. Good night, guys.
All right, everybody. There's Todd McCormick. yeah, like I said, it was just fucking a weird set of circumstances. Dude started showing up in the chat, like talking shit, and I was just like, what the fuck is going on here? And then the name and the fact that he's in these documents, and I was like, holy shit, this is the biggest snitch in U.S. history. I'm not even bullshitting you right now. But yeah, I will say this, like, I didn't want to say this with Todd on the screen necessarily because it's my message, not him, but you know, I'm absolutely fucking disgusted at the amount of people that put up with shit in 2021, snitch shit in 2021. It's crazy, dude. There's fucking res dogs trying to make a reappearance. We've talked about fucking Uncle Fester on this show and his narc ass ways. We've talked about the Seeds Here Now narc shit. We've talked about all kinds of fucking bullshit that it's just like, I don't know. Like, I think it's crazy that people get to exist in this space that fucking have done this shit. And if you don't have respect for the history of what happened between people and the fear that was real with the fucking DEA and shit, people have gotten super complacent nowadays, I feel like. Just because weed's legal, right? In a lot of places. Well, it's not in a lot of other places. And the DEA is still a real thing. And people are pretty lackadaisical about this shit. And to even throw out a fucking threat of, I'm going to fucking call the cops, or I'm going to call Metric, or I'm going to call anybody. It's like, dude, I look around and, like I said, I fucking hate snitches, but I also don't really like people who do business with snitches. And my community or my circle is small because I just don't get it. I don't get why you cash a check from somebody who's fucking got snitch behavior and shit. And I don't know. But that's the spookiest shit I can think of on this Halloween.
There's probably a lot of people you've done business with indirectly that do business with snitches still.
That's what I'm kind of saying. It's just like, I don't know. The snitch culture's heavy. Off from Tekashi 6ix9ine shit. It's like everyone's just fucking, I don't even know who the fuck that really is other than he's a fucking giant snitch and still has a career somehow. And that's the 2021-ish shit I've ever heard in my life. Like, why the fuck do people allow snitches to continue? Why does a guy like Kogo even have a fucking Instagram page? I'm going to sound like a crybaby bitch, but I'm getting my pages deleted. I worked my ass off 8 years to build an Instagram page and build it up to almost 100,000 people. And yet a fucking piece of shit snitch who's advertising openly that he's a fucking snitch and fucking he snitched and he's got the recipe from fucking Seed Bank. Come buy it. He's got a booth at Indo Expo in my city. This shit's fucked up, dude. But yeah, with that said, I'll shut up before I get myself in more trouble. But yeah, I don't know. Fuck snitching. Happy Halloween, everybody. And hopefully, yeah, stay safe out there. Peace. Thanks, C's.
You're welcome.
Little baby gay fish, come sit on my shoulder today. Little gay parrot fish, sit on my shoulder today and make me a fried shrimpy dish with some soy sauce, baby. As the beat drops, super fried. Super fried egg roll, triple fried fried rice. Triple fried rice, baby. 2 for 1 egg roll. Super triple fried rice, triple fried rice, baby. Don't forget the soy sauce. Chan chan chan. There's my gay fish song, dudes. What?